What's up, guys? It has been with Ben's election predictions, and we are going to dive into a 2024 presidential prediction if the election were held today, or let's say the first Tuesday in November of 2023. Obviously, we are around 1 year out from the 2024 presidential election, but as we've seen pretty recently, there is a lot of polling out, and there's a lot of speculation, news stories being written about something that will happen 1 year from now. And we have a pretty good idea of who we think will run in 2024. So I don't, obviously a lot of things can change between now and actual election day, but I do not think it's a fool's errand to, do a prediction now of if the election were held today, what I think will, uh, what would happen. But I also want to caveat that, I fully do expect this prediction to change as things will happen, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's with the economy, with the you know recession, whether it's with gas prices, or whether it's with inflation, or whether there's a million things that can happen between now and election day with the October surprises. So and here's the rating guide. Just for reference, I know I covered it in the last video, but just wanted to give you a reminder here. So the one thing that I wanted to note is, the amount of polling that we've already gotten on this race, over a year out. And I mean, this is polling that we've been getting, for the past year now. Trump and Biden have 100% name ID, so I don't necessarily think there's an issue of, oh, I don't know who these people are, or I don't know what these people stand for. Like, is this person a Democrat or Republican? I mean, people have definitely heard of Joe Biden and Donald Trump, whether you're politically engaged or not. And one thing to note in the polling here is, neither candidate is polling above 45%. And one thing that will be pretty interesting, and I think part of the reason for that, and most of these polls are actually head to head, so they aren't including, but I actually don't think it would be surprising if on election day, Joe Biden or Donald Trump do not exceed 45%. Do I think it's likely? Probably not, because most people come back to their candidate, as we saw, in 2020, Joe Biden got above 50% of the vote. Donald Trump had around, 46, 47%. But in 2016, neither candidate got above 50% because of the third party candidates. And just to flash up on the screen, this is my prediction for what I think is going to happen a year from now. Obviously, it's very, very hard to predict. I have Joe Biden winning with, in a very, very tight election. Trump improves upon his 2020 performance. But if the election were held today, I'm going to dive right in. So I don't think, I need to cover a lot of the states from last time. I think Florida and Texas are going to go to Donald Trump. I think states like Minnesota and New Hampshire are going to go to Joe Biden. However, if the election were held today, I do think Trump would win North Carolina by a margin of 2 to 3 to even 4 percentage points. I mean, and I think I'll cover this in the entire video, but Trump has Trump's doing very, very well in the Republican primary. And although he's not campaigning, he's kind of doing the strategy of what Joe Biden did in the 2020 presidential cycle, is kind of being in his basement. And he's kind of been immune from these scandals. He has 4 indictments, and you would think these would hurt him, but they've only strengthened him. And he's up in the polls. It's very, very narrow, but Biden very narrowly won the 2020 presidential cycle, and Biden won the popular vote by 4.5 percentage points. So if the popular vote is actually tied, then Trump would win, and it wouldn't be as close as it was in 2016, or or 2020. I mean, Trump lost the popular vote in 2016 by two points and won by an even bigger margin than Joe Biden did in um in 2020 if you look at the electoral map. I know it's the same amount of electoral votes, but if you actually look at the raw vote totals in the tipping point states, Trump had a bigger margin in 2016 than Biden did in 2020. Anyway, so I think because of inflation, because of the perceived state of the economy, the economy in a lot of metrics actually isn't doing that poorly. But Joe Biden's approval rate on the economy is like in the 20s, and so I think this does matter. And so I think that Trump would win in North Carolina. I think he would win in Georgia by a pretty similar margin as well. This is a state that Biden won in 2020. But this is also a state that Brian Kemp, blew Stacey Abrams out of the water in 2022. And Herschel Walker, who was, a very flawed candidate running against an incumbent, nearly won. I mean, so I think Trump is a stronger candidate than Herschel Walker. And I think with just, how poorly people perceive Joe Biden right now, and if the national vote would be tied, and I think if the election were held today, I don't think the polls, fully reflect what the actual vote totals win. I think if the election were held today, Joe Biden would probably win by like 2 percentage points in the um popular vote. But I do think RFK Jr., Cornel West, and maybe some other candidates would, as a protest vote from like the far left, would also gain some traction too, which I think would overall help Trump. And I'll do a video later talking about the effect of third parties. But anyway, moving on to the states that I think Joe Biden would win. I do think Joe Biden would win Michigan. I don't know if I should put it as a tilt or a lean, because I do think even today, after Roe, with the Democratic trifecta, I just don't see Donald Trump winning this state. I think it was a little bit of a fluke when he won in 2016. This was the closest of the states in the Rust Belt. Donald Trump only got 47.3% of the vote. And if you look at Biden in 2020, he got over 50%. So I do think the politics of the auto worker strike will have an impact here. It'll kind of be seen to whether, is this going to help Trump? Is this going to help Biden? I do think, seeing Biden on the picket lines, that seemed a little bit more organic and natural than, Trump doing his rally, where people are like, are these people even union workers? And I think the Democratic history with union voters will matter a little bit more here. Though, many of those white working class voters who I'm sure work at the auto factories, did support Trump. I mean, some of them did support Trump in a big way in 2016 and 2020. Okay, now moving on back to Donald Trump. So, like I said in the last video, I actually do think if the election were held today in Arizona, I do think that Trump would win this state. So that this was a state last time that I said that Joe Biden would win. I think part of the reason is because you have someone like Kari Lake on the ballot in 2024. But if the election were held today, Kari Lake wouldn't be on the ballot. Obviously, this is a total hypothetical thing. I just think Kari Lake is poison, even though she was up by 9 points in some polls in 2022. She just lost, and a lot of it had to do with January 6th and the election denialism. And so for a similar reason, I do think Trump was going to win in Nevada as well. This was a state that he's lost two times before, but I genuinely think it's going to be a very, very close state. But this is a state that's, just slowly but surely been trending right. And I think when Trump does better with Hispanics in 2024, he's going to gain those voters and not lose as many of the white college educated voters that have a bigger presence in some of these other states. And so that's my logic there. So, and I don't really think it's going to matter, now or between um election day. So next up, I'm going to go to the state of Pennsylvania. I still think Biden wins the state. And a lot of it has to do with what I was talking about in the last video. There's not a Democratic trifecta like there is in Michigan, but Josh Shapiro is a very popular governor, and this does have an impact down ballot. Obviously, the presidential races are a lot more partisan, but people are in their corners. But in a state like Pennsylvania, where it was decided by 1 percentage point each time, that's going to have an impact. And obviously, like John Fetterman isn't doing any favors to the Democrats in Pennsylvania, but Josh Shapiro definitely has a more prominent and powerful role here. And I think the Democratic turnout machine is just going to keep on running, and Biden's going to win that state. If the election were held today, who do I think would win? I think that Donald Trump would win if the election were held today. I think he wins Wisconsin. I think voter turnout is going to be a little lower than it was in 2020, because in 2020 it was just, through the roof. And I think Donald Trump wins back some of the voters that he lost in 2020. And I think that some of the voters that came out in the coalition, to stop Trump, and maybe who more low propensity voters, they won't turn out. And I mean, will Trump lose some voters? And will yes, he will. But Wisconsin is a state that was so close in 2022 that, or in 2020, all it takes is a couple of percentage points in this demographic group and a couple of percentage points in this demographic group to make the difference. So that is my prediction here. As you can see, 277 to 259. For the sake of this, I'll say that Trump wins these two districts. So he'll be at 279 to 259. Obviously, on a knife's edge, anything could change this. I swear I'm not just doing this for content to have it be close. I do think if the election were held today, despite all Trump's baggage, despite all of his indictments, I think that he wins. And that is primarily due to, there's not a lot of enthusiasm behind Biden. His approval ratings aren't very good. And a lot of Democrats are not excited to vote for him. He's getting older. He's not as quick on his feet and adept as he was earlier on in his career. So let me know if you agree with this predictions. Leave a thumbs up, drop a comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and I'll see y'all later.